A white couple refused to sit next to a black woman on the plane? Big mistake. What happens when a white couple demands that a black woman be moved from her seat on a plane? They had no idea she would be the one to turn the entire system upside down. What followed left the whole flight in stunned silence. Some moments in life simply do not require an explanation because actions speak so loudly that polite speech would only dilute their meaning. That's how Sophia Oakes moved through the cabin of SkyVista Flight 237, not looking for applause after helping an elderly woman hoist her bag into the overhead bin. She didn't ask for admiration. She just offered her shoulder, steady and sure, and walked away without ceremony. She was 52 years old, a high school English teacher, a widow who had raised 3 children alone, and yes, something that had become a particular irritant to some people. She was black. Not light brown, not exotic or diverse. No, she was black, deep as a night sky over rural Georgia, where she grew up, and she wore that history quietly on her skin as she stepped into the plane cabin towards seat 12A. Seat 12A, she had reserved it weeks in advance. She always picked the window because she loved watching the clouds slip by beneath her, not in childish curiosity, but as someone who had survived far too much to not savor silence and altitude. She did not expect her flight to begin with grandeur or ceremony. It began instead with a swamp of human arrogance. When she approached her row, there was already a white couple lingering there. The man in a crumpled polo, the woman in a tan blazer, their smiles so practiced they could have been painted. And the instant they saw Sophia approaching, their expressions shifted, as though they were not looking at a woman, but a flaw in their comfortable system. "Excuse me," she said politely but firmly, holding her boarding pass up. "That is my seat, 12A. The woman's features twisted instantly, as if she had spotted something unspeakable. We thought someone else was sitting here," she said, voice clipped, lukewarm panic simmering in her tone. "Someone else?" Sophia repeated, letting the words hang between them like accusations. The man cleared his throat, evidently training his tone to sound reasonable. "Well, my wife has sensitivities to certain scents. We cannot sit near." And then his courage failed him. The unspoken word hung in the air, as thick and rancid as spoiled milk in a warehouse of denial. Sophia could have backed down. She could have quietly surrendered her seat, but hell no. She held her ground. "This is my seat," she said, voice steady as bedrock. "Purchased, paid for, confirmed. If that is a problem, you can speak with the flight attendant. Maybe she'll find you a seat farther away from people you prefer to avoid." For one suspended second, the aisle fell into silence so absolute you could have heard frustration breathing. Then the flight attendant appeared, young, overtrained smile plastered to her face, as if misbehavior on a flight were just another downloadable etiquette module. "May I help you?" she asked in that synthetic friendliness. "They will not sit here because I am black," Sophia said, with calm precision. "Oh, sorry, because they have an allergy, probably to melanin." "Ma'am," the attendant began tentatively, "would you consider moving to the rear of the aircraft just to avoid conflict?" "Oh yes, of course, because it's always easier to ask the black woman to move instead of teaching the white racists in matching designer shirts to behave decently with a passenger whom they happen to dislike." "No," she replied flat. "I am not a conflict. I am a passenger." The woman's temper frayed. "We are not obligated to tolerate this." "You are correct," came a voice from behind, low and calm. A gray-haired gentleman in a charcoal jacket, haircut slicked back, nodded once. "And I am not obligated to tolerate your racism. If you want to move, you may. If not, you will have to exit." Moments later, other voices rose up, cautious and righteous. Someone pulled out a phone, whispered, "Let them even try to touch her." A few tense steps forward by the man were halted by the attendant, raising her palm like a dam stopping a flood. "Please remain calm. I must consult the captain." Sophia lowered herself into her seat without a word. From her tote bag, she retrieved a worn paperback, Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, flipped it open in the middle. Not to start reading, no. To remind herself, resilience is not noisy. It is stubborn, quiet, unyielding. That was her anchor. Meanwhile, the couple lingered near the exit, probably banking on the airline throwing her off the flight just to avoid a scene. Not gonna happen. The senior flight attendant, older, professional, unafraid, approached. She spoke to the couple quietly, but her tone was firm. Within minutes, the pair was escorted up to business class. No fireworks, just a relocation. They had energy for complaints, but no endurance for conflict. A ripple of applause rolled through the cabin, not raucous, not performative, but heartfelt, honest approval. Sophia did not turn around to thank them. She did not want applause. She wanted to fly. When the jet engines hummed and the aircraft ascended into the sky, the clouds drifting past her window like slow wings, she felt something churn inside her. A familiar anger, yes, but colder now, purer. This wasn't about a seat anymore, not even about a flight. It was about being stripped of one's humanity over and over, based purely on how she looked. Over like 1,000 other times in countless places. But you know what? This time she was not going to swallow it. Sophia hadn't even had time to settle her spine against the stiff blue seat back when she felt that thick, invisible tension curling around her chest. Not from the cabin pressure, not from the jet engine hum, but from something deeper, stickier, unmistakably familiar. That creeping kind of social static that black folks learn to notice young, the way animals feel an earthquake seconds before it hits. The plane was climbing, altitude rising steadily, but around her the air didn't lighten. If anything, it had gotten heavier. Too many eyes, too many glances that weren't just curious, they were calculating. Too many half-whispers, sharp and sticky, like needles dragged across silk. She pulled her thermos from the side pocket, unscrewed the cap, and brought it to her lips. The mint tea inside wasn't fancy. It was basic, homemade, something her mother taught her to brew after long work days to keep the nerves from boiling over. She took a sip, slow and careful, like she was trying to tame her own heartbeat. And that's when she saw them, walking up the aisle like they owned the oxygen on board. The white couple from business class. Yes, those same two pearls of polite prejudice, Mr. and Mrs. Allergic to Presents. He marched behind her, tight-lipped and stiff, jaw clenched so hard you'd think he was biting into his own pride. She, with her beige cardigan draped over her shoulders like some badge of suburban nobility, wore a look like she'd just caught a whiff of rotting meat, and the closer they got, the clearer it became. This wasn't over. The woman didn't address Sophia directly. Of course not. She turned to the flight attendant instead. Nice young woman, probably regretting her life choices just about now, and with a voice trembling, not from fear but from the performance of fear, the kind that hoped for an audience, she declared, "We were informed this passenger uses aromatic oils. That could trigger asthma. It's a safety concern." Her words sliced through the cabin like cold water on bare skin. Passengers leaned in, some eyebrows lifted, others reached discreetly for their phones, unlocking them, tilting the screens, angling their lenses like seasoned documentarians of human nonsense. Sophia barely blinked. She muttered under her breath, low enough for only her seatmate and the ancestors to hear, "If I had an allergy to hypocrisy, I'd have passed out from sitting this close to you." The flight attendant looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, preferably on a beach with a mojito in one hand and no uniform in sight. Her face twitched with the kind of regret people usually reserve for bad tattoos and exes. "Miss Oakes," she began, trying to keep her voice even, "would you be willing to—" "No," Sophia said, calm as a lake before a storm. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had weight, enough to still the air around them. "I would not. I am not a fragrance. I am not an irritant. I am not a safety concern. I am a human being in the seat I paid for. If anyone here is causing a health risk, it's whoever's trying to erase me from where I belong." Again. The man stepped forward now, puffing up like a pigeon in a power struggle. "Look," he began, condescension dripping off every syllable. "We're not trying to cause a scene, but this is unacceptable. We paid for a certain level of comfort, and we have the right—" "You have the right to sit down and hush," came a voice from behind. It wasn't Sophia. It was an elderly woman, white-haired, sharp-eyed, cross swinging from her neck like a pendulum of judgment. She stood slowly, with that deliberate, dignified weight only age can lend, and pointed a trembling finger at the couple. "You also have the right to walk your behinds back to your seats and maybe, just maybe, learn what it means to be decent human beings." The silence cracked. Then came applause. Not thunderous, not choreographed, but a slow, tired clapping born from people who'd seen enough. Not solidarity so much as exhaustion. Because sometimes you don't clap for justice. You clap because you're tired of watching people try to dodge it. Sophia was already easing back into her seat when the intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the captain's voice, clinical and dry, "due to an onboard incident, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Denver." No elaboration, no apologies. Just incident, as though racism were turbulence, and she was somehow the gust of wind. As if her refusal to disappear quietly had compromised the sanctity of air travel. The man across the aisle chuckled darkly. "They're gonna drag her off the plane. he muttered to no one in particular. Bet you $100. They better drag themselves, the woman beside him said, not even looking up as she flipped her phone to video mode. I've been recording since takeoff. The landing was rough. Purposefully so, maybe. The plane jolted against the tarmac like it was rejecting the whole situation. No one spoke. No one laughed. And as the engines wound down, that silence returned, thick and loaded, like a held breath before bad news. The doors opened. Up came two security personnel and a Sky Vista representative. Suit, tie, earpiece, clipboard, the whole performance. Mr. and Mrs. Randall? The rep asked, polite, but with a steel edge tucked beneath his syllables. Please follow us. You are being removed from the flight under advisement from security. The woman gasped, scandalized. What? No, she's the one. She provoked us. We are the victims here. The rep didn't flinch. We've received enough video from passengers to determine inappropriate behavior was directed at Miss Oakes. You'll be escorted to the terminal. Any further outbursts may lead to a federal report. As they were being walked down the aisle, the man turned towards Sophia, rage simmering in his voice. You have no idea who you're messing with. We have resources. Sophia turned her head slowly, made eye contact, and said with the kind of poise that cuts deeper than anger ever could, and I have dignity. Let's see who runs out first. More applause, louder this time. But Sophia didn't smile. She didn't bask in it, because for her this wasn't over. It never was. This was just one skirmish in a war that had been waged since her grandmother first cleaned houses in Savannah for nickels and slurs. Later, once the flight resumed and the cabin calmed, the captain emerged. The same man who'd earlier chosen silence now took his hat off and stood before her. Miss Oakes, he said, voice low, I want to say, I'm sorry for what you endured. Your strength. Don't make me a hero, Sophia interrupted. Not cruelly, just truthfully. Just learn how to listen. When a black woman says no, it's not an act of aggression. It's a boundary. Respect it. He nodded and left. And only then, as the clouds drifted past her window once more, soft, pale, undisturbed, did she finally let her shoulders drop. Not in surrender, in reclamation. She wasn't just seated, she was rooted, and no one was moving her. Not this time. The plane was already descending toward Seattle, the skyline a distant whisper beyond the clouds, when Sophia noticed it. Not the hum of the engines or the ping of the seatbelt sign. No, it was that look, that slow, shifting gaze from the flight attendant. The same one who, not 3 hours earlier, had tried to gently suggest that Sophia take her rightful self to the back of the plane for the sake of harmony. Now that same woman couldn't seem to stop glancing over. Gone was the robotic hospitality. What remained in her expression was something raw, uncertainty, discomfort, maybe even respect or fear. It was hard to tell. Both emotions tended to wear the same expression on people who just realized they'd misjudged the moment and underestimated the person. 10 minutes later, the attendant approached. Miss Oakes, she said, voice tight like she'd rehearsed the words too many times. The captain and a representative from our airline would like to speak with you. In the forward cabin, it's regarding an important matter. Your belongings can remain here. Sophia didn't ask questions. She just stood. The silence that rolled across the cabin as she moved was not subtle. It was heavy and deliberate, like someone had sucked the air out of the room and left only questions behind. Every eye turned toward her, some with support, some with shame, and more than a few with that quiet, breathless anticipation that lives at the edge of a breaking story. She walked, spine straight, footsteps slow. Behind her trailed 1,000 assumptions and one truth. No one was brave enough to follow. They just watched. Phones at the ready, eyes wide, mouths shut. She passed through the curtain. Behind it, the lighting changed, softer, more clinical. The luxury of distance. Waiting for her was a man in a suit, sharp creases, medium price tag, and the practiced stillness of someone who speaks in controlled statements for a living. Next to him stood the captain, his hat off, his hands clasped loosely at his waist, face pale and drawn like a chalk outline. Miss Oakes, the suited man began, extending a hand. My name is Raymond Costner. I represent Sky Vista's central office. You've become part of, well, a situation that goes far beyond the standard parameters of in-flight service. Sophia didn't take his hand. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She simply looked at him, right in his face. No expression, no reaction, just gaze. Steady, firm, the kind of look that makes people sweat through their collar seams. If he was expecting gratitude or grace, he was about to be freshly disappointed. He cleared his throat. We've been monitoring public response in real time. The footage from this flight is already circulating. Your name, unfortunately or fortunately, is rapidly becoming a symbol. He tapped on a tablet. The screen lit up. There it was, her silhouette framed in the aisle. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't pushing. She wasn't dramatic. She just stood there, back straight, hair tied back, eyes fierce. That quiet kind of resistance that doesn't need a slogan, just presence. We'd like to offer, he paused, searching for a phrase, something that didn't sound like a bribe, not compensation, an opportunity. Sophia tilted her head, slowly, the way a lioness might consider whether the creature in front of her was worth engaging or ignoring. Her silence was an invitation. Go ahead, say it. Let's hear what you came up with. We've reviewed your background, teacher, mother, organizer. You developed anti-discrimination curricula in Atlanta schools. We'd like to work with you, develop a training program for our staff on communication, cultural awareness, and respect. You could be a consultant or a mentor, whatever role you feel suits your expertise. She blinked once, not in surprise, in disbelief. You want me to become the face of the very thing you tried to push to the back of the plane? Raymond's cheeks darkened. A subtle pink, not quite shame, not quite panic, just enough color to show the truth had found its mark. I understand how it might sound, but no, she cut in. You don't. You're just hoping it doesn't sound worse once the headlines start printing. Tell me something, Mr. Costner. How many women like me have you quietly asked to reseat and never logged the incident? How many passengers have you removed from flights without a single entry in your reports, just because someone else couldn't handle our existence? For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of her words hung like lead. Then the captain stepped forward. Miss Oakes, he said, voice low, I want to say this clearly. I saw what happened, and I didn't act fast enough. I've been trained to avoid conflict, not to face it. But watching you made me realize silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice, and I don't want to be on the side of silence anymore. Now that was new. Sophia stepped forward. No anger in her movements, just intention. She stared at both men, full on. Let them take her in, not as a PR problem, not as a diversity checkbox, but as a human being who was done being told to wait her turn. All right, she said finally, I'll write your program. I'll train your staff, but there won't be photos, no quotes, no feel-good press releases with my name stamped across a smiling poster. You don't get to call yourselves renewed until every captain, every flight attendant, every corporate suit in this company takes and passes a test I design. That's the standard. She turned to the captain. And you, sir, will be the first. The man didn't flinch, just nodded. Agreed. Sophia took one last look at them. She didn't gloat. She didn't scold. She simply stated what had always been true. This isn't about launching some shiny new initiative. It's about making sure that a black woman, someone who looks like me, can sit down in her seat, drink her tea, and land in her destination without being turned into a spectacle. Not a hero, not a headline, just a passenger with a ticket and dignity. Then she turned and walked back through the curtain. No fanfare, no grand exit, just quiet steps and sharper silence. As she returned to her seat, she saw the shift. Some passengers lowered their eyes. Some looked away in shame. Others quietly locked their phones and set them down. And one woman, an older black woman, silver hair pulled into a soft bun, eyes wet, reached out as Sophia passed. If you were my daughter, she whispered, voice catching, I'd be proud. Sophia paused, nodded once. The first smile of the entire flight crossed her lips. Soft, brief, but real. Not because she needed praise, but because now she knew she wasn't alone. 1 month had passed. Sophia sat in a modest room at the Atlanta Community Center. The light overhead was dim, flickering occasionally like it couldn't decide whether to cooperate or not. The chairs were that familiar kind of plastic, hard, gray, stackable, the kind you only see in PTA meetings, union halls, and church basements. In her hand, a battered thermos of black coffee that smelled just a little burnt, just right, just like she remembered it from when she used to attend her son's parent-teacher conferences. The kind of scent that held memories, not flavor. Before her sat 38 people, pilots, flight attendants, desk supervisors, all of them employees of Sky Vista Airlines, and none of them were talking. Some stared at her directly. Some fiddled with their ID badges like they were lottery tickets. Others, older ones, locked their eyes on her like they were trying to gauge whether she was for real, whether she could handle their silent resistance, or if she'd shrink back like so many others. But she didn't shrink. She stood, the same Safia as always. Hair in braids, gray jacket, no press, no makeup, no filter, no applause needed. She wasn't here for theatrics. She was the camera now, the testimony, the receipt. "What did you feel," she asked calmly, "when you saw the video?" Not a soul answered. Just breathe. The low hum of people holding their thoughts like glass in their hands, afraid to drop them, but unwilling to share. "Don't perform," she said. "I'm not here for policy statements or PR rehearsals. I'm here so we can stop pretending this was a one-time event. What happened to me wasn't a glitch in the system. It was a pattern. And whether you like it or not, you are a thread in that pattern." A young flight attendant in the second row raised his hand. His fingers shook slightly. "Honestly," he said, "my first thought was, great, another scandal over nothing. But then I watched it, watched how you just stood there. No yelling, no explaining, just stood. And I realized that if it had been someone else, someone white, they probably wouldn't have had to stand at all. Nobody would have touched them." Sophia nodded once. "That's exactly where we'll begin." This wasn't a training. This was a reckoning. The program she created was called In Our Place. It wasn't about tolerance or diversity or feel-good messaging. It was about silence and how silence makes accomplices. It was about the sharp ring of quiet when a black woman gets called aggressive simply for existing with presence. It was about the moments when a flight attendant doesn't say anything, not because they agree, but because they're tired, because they know silence won't get them called into HR. She read letters aloud, not hers, others, from black women who'd been asked to move, to be quiet, to not make it awkward. Letters full of clenched dignity and quiet fury. She played security footage, clips from airports where the pattern repeated like clockwork. Random bag checks, inexplicable delays, passenger conduct concerns. And she talked, blunt, unapologetic, sharp as truth itself. "As long as your colleagues treat black skin like a risk factor," she said, pacing slowly, "you are part of the problem. As long as you say nothing when a black woman's natural hair is labeled unsanitary, you are not observers. You are collaborators, co-conspirators." A few looked away. One man pressed his lips into a flat, angry line. Finally, he spoke. "So what do you expect us to do? We don't get to pick who boards the plane. We just follow procedure." Safia turned, slow and steady, until her eyes landed squarely on him. "And who do you think writes those procedures? Ghosts? Those rules are built by people who call white male behavior neutral and everything else a deviation. And every time you go along with it, every time you look the other way, you uphold it. You serve a system that is already cracking under its own weight." Later, after the session ended, she was invited to Sky Vista's main office. The walls were glass now, but they didn't seem impenetrable anymore. She sat in a conference room that overlooked the tarmac. There, under fluorescent lights, waited Raymond Costner. He greeted her with a nod. Not too familiar, but not corporate either. "We've got 5 branches enrolled in your program already," he said. "We've renamed the internal ethics charter. It's called The Right to Sit. You're listed as the author." She raised an eyebrow. "I didn't ask to be a symbol. I asked for your staff to stop pretending they were blind." He didn't flinch. "It's working," he said. "We received a letter from a passenger on Flight 712. Black woman. Young. There was a couple. Same old complaints. Allergies. Strong scents. But this time, the attendant said, 'I'm sorry. We don't relocate people based on other passengers' preferences. She has a ticket. She's sitting here.'" Safia turned toward the window. Outside, a plane took off, a small silhouette slicing the sky. "Good," she said. "But this isn't the end." "I know," he replied. "It's only the beginning." The next morning, she opened her mailbox and found a small plain envelope. No return address. Just a folded note inside. The handwriting was careful, almost nervous. "I didn't move. Only because of you. Thank you. 22A. She read it twice. Then she placed it in the same drawer where she kept her son's childhood drawings. Because that's where the sacred things go. The ones that matter. The ones that remind you it was worth it. A week later, she flew to New York to give a lecture at a university. A class on social structures, power, and perception. She didn't ask for special treatment, didn't request anything. But when she got her ticket, her seat number made her pause. Banirandeye. She boarded. She sat. She opened her book. Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. A quiet voice from beside her. "Aren't you the woman from the video?" She looked up, just for a second, then nodded. Yes, I am. A woman. And this is my seat. And it was taken. Permanently.